Welcome, everyone, to today's program sponsored by the ISM chapters in New Jersey, Dallas, Nevada, and Denver. And a special thank you goes out to Mary Walker from the ISM Dallas chapter for assisting with today's program. If you should have any questions for our speaker today, please use the chat or the Q&A function. Our presentation today will be on starting and navigating the CPSM certification with our featured speaker, Jim Fleming. Jim is a supply chain manager and a senior instructor at the Institute for Supply Management. He is also a CPSM, CPSD, and has spent over 30 years working for the Intel Corporation. He is retired from Intel in 2014 and pursued his passion for education by joining ISM. At this point, I'd like to turn the program over to Jim.
Thank you, Kathy. Folks, thank you for joining us today. The topic of CPSM and certification is kind of near and dear to my heart. We have put so much time and energy into moving the profession forward. And I'm not just talking about ISM. I'm talking about the individuals that are working in this industry, working in this profession. It has changed so much over the past 10 years, but then you can look back and you say it's changed in the last 1 year. And one of the things that we want to do is just kind of continue to help us gain, knowledge, gain skills, gain abilities to take on these challenges that we've never seen before and try to enable solutions. So today we're going to be spending a little bit of time kind of going through what is the CPSM certification and how do you work through the journey in order to attain the certification. For those that have either gone through the process in the past or are possibly in the middle of it, you already kind of realize there's a lot of information. If you're new to the journey or you're thinking about it, we'll talk to it. We'll give some tips and tricks. We'll talk about the preparation, and we'll also talk about the testing itself. Spend a little bit of time talking about who ISM is. One of the things that we have continued to see with the emergence of supply management, how it's transitioned, over the last few decades, and where it's going. Because the future is nothing but bright. If you were to take a look at it, if you think our relevance today is high, when you look into the future, we continue to see more and more companies, the executives, the CFOs are coming forward to say, we need more professionals with the knowledge and supply management background. We'll talk about CPSM and who is it for? It's a commitment, but it's also an achievable commitment once you decide, and there's a lot of benefits coming out of it. We'll walk through the certification itself. How do you kind of step through, again, the building blocks of preparing for the exam, but also the building blocks for getting the actual certification. And we'll talk to what are the options to prepare. There are a variety of them, which is really nice. It gives people an opportunity to meet your personal needs. And every one of us are very unique in how we're moving forward, what our life is like, what we have going on in work, in life, and just how much time we have to kind of prepare. ISM, we've been around since 1915, and there's a lot of firsts that are in the Institute for Supply Management. We were originally asked by the post-World War I, by the President of the United States, to kind of pull together a professional body to kind of take a look at what does it look like to basically coordinate war efforts. And supply chain was realized at that time was very complex, and nobody really kind of understood what it would take. So moving forward, ISM under a different name. It wasn't ISM back then, but started to get working professionals together and kind of pulling them together. A couple things came out of it. We started to see there's a need to train individuals to pick up these skills. So we were the first supply chain certification. At the time, and some of you may have it, it was the CPM. And it has since transitioned into the CPSM. And a lot of that is just kind of the relevance and how the profession has changed. We've gone from a predominantly focused area of procurement into a full end-to-end supply chain, where procurement is one portion of it. So that's kind of the transition that's taken us into the CPSM, was to keep up with where we're at and where we need to go. A lot of individuals are using the monthly report on business. This is your PMI. We look at it from a manufacturing, we look at it from a non-manufacturing, and recently in this past year, we started looking at it from a healthcare or hospital, because that's a market that continues to emerge. So there's a number of different firsts that ISM continues to bring forward and trying to help shape. You can see things in, down below where we're dealing with business ethics. And I've been on the receiving end of some of the, working with companies that, while it really seems easy and straightforward to deal with ethics, our environment is sometimes ripe with things to be unethical. So what we have to do is make sure that we're taking this challenge on, and we're doing it in a way that keeps society moving forward, keeps everybody that's in the chain itself in a legal and ethical situation. We continue to see sustainability moving forward. Social responsibility. There are so many articles out there today that, since the supply chain has been stressed and there is a huge demand, in order to keep up and provide supply, people are kind of defaulting into using slave labor. They're using more child labor. And that's where what we have to do is make sure that we're doing this in a way that is healthy today and healthy into the future. What's shaping or reshaping supply management? We continue to see technology. There has been such an emergence in technologies coming forward. What's kind of amazing is that when you step back and think about it, the internet has really only been around just a little over 30 years. So when I started in the profession, with Intel, we were a technology company making computer chips, but that was before the internet was even around. And as an engineer working there, it was just amazing that we got anything done when I look back. And then I watched as that continued to move forward, and it took over so many different portions of the business. So it went not only from the manufacturing and design, but it moved into the sales, it moved into marketing, it moved into HR, finance, and it's continued to explode in the supply management. So that's going to be kind of a huge emerging thing going forward. Uncertainty. I think the last 2 years has created a degree of uncertainty that people didn't even believe would ever occur. So I remember going through, 10, 15, 20 years ago, and when we were talking about risk management, we would put this thing out there that was called kind of a global pandemic. And people internally would laugh and they said, that'll never happen. So think, the feedback was, Jim, think practically. So don't come up with these hairball ideas. And that was kind of the general mental models that industry worked with. The COVID-19 reshaped the entire mindset. There have been so many companies that were caught off guard. There are many companies that are no longer in business because they didn't have that ability to have resilience in the uncertainty. Sustainability. I think everywhere you look today, you're starting to see people and corporations and societies and countries saying, we need to do business differently. we can't consume at the rate and the means that we have been doing over the past years. So focus on green energy, wind, solar, taking a look at sustainability in how we're treating the resources. We're moving into more electric cars, and it just continues to emerge. And globalization. This is something, while companies today continue to, they were connected in a global environment, and then the pandemic hit. There was a lot of conversation around, we need to get out of globalization and get back into national or regional supply chains. While that's a noble concept, the reality is we will continue to remain a global environment, a global supply chain, because a lot of companies can't market or sell their products in certain regions of the world unless they're made partially there. So, we have to just kind of continue to grasp onto this to say, yes, we need to look for more regional sources. We need to think about supply chain in that regional, but we can't ignore globalization. So one of the things that we want to do is just say that continues to reshape who we are today, who we're going to be in 5 years, and who we're going to be in 10. And what's interesting is that Gartner put out some statistics here in the past year, and it talks about 50% of the corporations or organizations really don't have a solid roadmap on how do you take and deal with the supply chain and the digital transformation. We saw through the COVID, people didn't have insight into visibility or transparency in your supply chain. So you didn't know where it was at. And if you did, you didn't know what the progress was because people just didn't have the tools. And so we're seeing an acceleration of technology. We're seeing an acceleration of taking and getting good, clean data to leverage in that technology. So if you're not part of that transformation now, I'm guessing your organization is going to be doing a heavy push in the near future. People that are in the midst of it, a lot of things are happening. And while it's difficult, it's also exciting because there are solutions that are coming to market that are getting easier to implement. It's no longer this, multi-million-dollar investment for some of these. Some of these are subscription-based, cloud enhanced or capable solutions. And you can run them with your smartphone. So we're finding ways to bring it forward and make it very applicable into our world without having to have, mass investment. Now, doesn't mean that there isn't significant investment, but it's just not what it once was. So the cloud technology has made the ability to have your networks. You don't have to have new networks being installed every other year because the technology is phased out or is obsolete. So a lot coming there. The other thing we want to deal with is the biggest thing that I see happening and at ISM is companies are asking supply management to get out of the tactical focus. So tactical is actually evolving. Tactical 5 or probably 15 years ago was we were there to process purchase orders. And I can remember in the environment I was in, that was the predominant role of supply management in a previous industry. We have moved to the point of saying, okay, we do more than just purchase order transactions. We got into this thing where we looked for cost reduction and cost avoidance. That seemed advanced 10 years ago. Here's where we're at today. That is now becoming the tactical way of doing business. And companies are asking, in a world of strategic focus, what are we doing to bring value to the enterprise? How do we make sure that our work is aligned to the business objectives and the key business stakeholders. Because if we're working in a vacuum, it doesn't make any difference with corporations going forward in trying to bring new products to market, stay viable in an economy that your ecosystem that continues to challenge and gobble up companies with a number of new companies coming on. So if you can't get in sync from a standpoint of a strategic world, we're going to be either behind or we're going to be non-existent. And that's one of the things that we're seeing is that innovation, there are places we can engage where not only just bring in cost reduction, that doesn't mean that we won't continue to focus on cost reduction or avoidance, but we're looking at solutions that are bringing us forward in generating revenue. So we're going top line. We're finding ways to bring innovation in, not only from the way we manage a supply chain, but what our suppliers can do. They have ideas, and we're tapping into their knowledge and connecting that earlier on in a product life cycle where they are working with research and development. And innovation comes from bringing new products and services to market sooner. When you're bringing them to market sooner, it's that difference between what you normally would have launched and an early launch. That's all top line revenue that gets allocated back into supply management. We have enabled new revenue to be generated or earlier revenue. And so it really does shape the way we need to think. Here we go with CAP's research, some of the statistics here. There is a significant amount of companies that are really looking and saying, we need to have a transformational initiative. They're looking to say, we can't just do it the old-fashioned way. So that's good news. But then you look at statistics within industries and you see there's still a pretty significant amount of roles that are being done that are tactical. So there's about a 50 to 60% of roles in certain industries that are still doing tactical focus. And we're in the 40%, approaching 50% that are doing strategic. We need to continue to move forward to do strategic. You're starting to find that a lot of the tactical things are capable of being dealt with through technology, through automation, that frees up our bandwidth, that allows us to focus on the strategic. Now, the key here is, what does it look like for you as an individual to be in that strategic environment? You need to have a toolbox. You need to have the ability to say, I can help here, 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 and here. And it's not just the kind of the old-fashioned, the toolbox you had one tool, and it was a hammer. And anytime I really needed to work hard on a supplier, I just took my hammer out and I beat them. And I hit harder until they gave in. Today, we're saying your tool belt, a hammer doesn't get it done. You need to be thinking about how do you work with tools that have, wrenches, have multimeters, have different ways of moving everybody forward, and that are creating a win-win environment. So your suppliers are getting tired of having that hammer be out. And we see many companies where they're walking away from their customer base because they have other options. So you really need to kind of step back and look in the mirror and say, are we enabling our success through partnership and solid relationship with our suppliers? Because they now have choices and they will put their energy into what is the most impactful for them. And if you treat them poorly, they will go elsewhere. We continue to need to think about shifting the organization into how do you think strategically? And the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about the competencies that are going to be involved. We need to talk about analytical expertise. And that's, if you were to look at the amount of data that's available in the world to choose from, it continues to grow exponentially. So we're talking about dealing with zettabytes now of information. And a zettabyte is 10 with 21 zeros after it. So let's step back. Most of us deal with megabytes. We kind of know what that is. A PowerPoint presentation like what I'm presenting today is about 14 megabyte. That has 6 zeros. Then we get into gigabyte. Well, that's much bigger, and a lot of us don't ever have the capability of sending that kind of file. That has 9 zeros. 21 zeros after that is the new way of measuring data in the world. And by the way, that's what we have available to be tapping into to drive new solutions. So the combination of dealing with analyzing data, utilizing technology to not only generate data, but also extract it and help us analyze it, move us into being able to take these skills and work as a business partner. We have a seat at the table because when we're there talking the language of our internal stakeholders and we're showing them that this change that we're working on influences this financial output or this business strategy, all of a sudden you have your internal stakeholders who are saying, I want more of it. Now, what we are dealing with is that most corporations we're talking to, only about 27% of the companies are saying that they have the talent they need in order to work into this new strategic focus. There comes the challenge that we have with individuals like yourself or chapters that you're dealing with in way of doing it is through the certification. It's not the only way, but it's a very powerful way. What goes into the CPSM? This is the 16 competencies that exist within the exam. And it really is an end-to-end strategic individual that will have the ability to kind of look at and read the environment, come up with a solution, and engage progress in your company. So we're dealing with one end of the spectrum, needing to think about being strong in business acumen and thinking about being a leader. A lot of you probably have been in this industry and you've seen how people progress, and as it expands, they need talented people to grow. So we have to pick up these leadership skills. But it taps into corporate social responsibility, category management, and it goes across from left to right. We're dealing with risk management like we've never dealt with before. We're talking about supplier relationship management. Again, you can't get by with just using the hammer the way we have in the past. And then coming up with what does a supply chain strategy look like in a global environment, a local environment, a regional environment. And then how do you tap into the capability of systems and technology as they continue to emerge? So today we have over 10,000 CPSM holders that continue to make a significant impact into corporations going forward. And there's a lot of leaders. There's a lot of success stories. Here's a few of them that really are individuals. The kind of the general testimonies is some individuals like Kylie, that she was our megawatt winner for the 30 under 30 this past year. And Kylie was in a different profession. She was an industrial engineer, and she needed to transition into supply management. Today, we have supply management degrees. We have supply management certifications. Back a number of years ago, there was no such schooling. There wasn't. You were an industrial engineer, and that's as close as you got. So she has found that she has been able to pick up new knowledge and insight that has moved her forward much quicker in her career. And you see some of these stories. We continue to see a common theme. People are getting knowledge and they're getting promoted. But we can take a look at our environment today. There are there are lots of job openings everywhere. And we're dealing with a lack of available skills, talent to kind of keep up. So it's almost as if you have, a significant amount of choice around who do you work with, who do you work for. When you have these skills and you have knowledge, it makes it that wide ranging of skills are getting 10 offers at a time when they're seeking. So we are continuing to move forward, and it helps gain confidence. And that, I think, is a key element moving us into the future. So what I'd like to see is us being able to create more of this with your available bodies, your available network, to kind of make sure that we can continue to shape the future. What does it do for you? Well, there's a lot of things out there that, individual salary. We're actually now looking at the average salaries are in the 6 digits for the most part. And that's a kind of a threshold we've really crossed through here in the last couple of years is these, and this is total compensation, but it's still, we're not talking about entry-level jobs. We're talking about very high-paying, very needed careers where there's lots of opportunity. So return on investment. CAPS research does show that on average, okay, so it looks like I have okay. Sorry about that, folks. It's a little bit of a technology. I don't know where it froze, and I don't. Let's see. So I'm going to ask. We're talking to the slide on your increase, your impact. Was it frozen when I was talking about the different individuals and their stories? I can go back on that. Okay. All right. Good enough. Sorry about that. So increasing your impact. Again, going into what is in it for you. We're dealing with salaries we've never seen before. And, if you didn't hear what I was talking about, we're seeing 6-figure salaries is kind of the average in today's environment. And when you pick up additional skills, there is nothing but opportunity for growth within companies. You continue to work across and see that return on investment. CAPS research puts out indicators on a routine basis. And a couple times a year, they say, they work with companies and say, what's the return on investment for supply management? And it's about 500 to 600% return on investment. So for every dollar invested in supply management, companies are getting back $5 or $6. And when people start to see what you're capable of, again, the seat at the table starts to expand. You'll learn more best practices, and you will really be able to keep up with and maintain your strategic focus that are being asked for by executives. So Norbert Dean, he has been part of ISM for a long time, and he's a vice president of strategic sourcing, and he's been CPOs at a number of different companies that he sees talent, and he continues to talk with us around what can we do to get more talent this way. So we're seeing a lot of executives that are really proponents around helping people get the certification and continue to move forward on their expansion of insight and best practices so we can keep up with the amount of changes going forward. So what's a certification look like? We'll talk through these 4 steps, and then we'll give you a chance to kind of explore what it looks like to go in and deal with one of the tools that exist within ISM, and that's called a learning system. So we'll talk through the eligibility. We'll look at what are the and complete the online certificate or application. So I'm going to ask one more time. I got a notice that my internet is unstable. Can you continue to hear me? If somebody can do in the chat. Okay, great, thanks. Eligibility, we're still dealing with having 3 years of full-time experience with a bachelor's degree, or without a bachelor's degree, we're looking at 5 years. And this hasn't changed in a long period of time. The reason we're dealing with having experience is that it allows the professional to take this knowledge and actually see how it's used and apply it for some period of time. It really is just kind of a whole rounded individual, the capability at the end is bringing so much more to the company that we really want to maintain that degree of standard. The 3 exams continue, let's see, back in 2017, we updated from the 2nd edition into the 3rd edition. So the 3 exams at this point consist of supply chain management or supply management core, which we're dealing with the competencies of sourcing, category management, all the way down into financial analysis. This is the long exam now. So it's 180 questions. It takes 3 hours to complete. And we'll talk a little bit about that here in a bit, because that's, I think, one of the biggest challenges people have getting through this is not only getting the knowledge to cover all of that, but taking that much time and basically trying to stay focused. So we'll give some tips and tricks to that. The 2nd exam is the integration of supply management. So this is around thinking about how do you create your overarching strategy? How do I look at my sales and operation to understand the demand forecast, the amount of inventory that I need, the capability? How do I link everything together from logistics and material management? 165 questions on the exam, and it takes 2 hours and 45 minutes. And then the 3rd exam is leadership in transformation and supply management. Now we're dealing with talking about that business acumen in leadership. And this kind of looks at it from 3 different approaches. How do you create strategy? How do you engage your stakeholders? And how do you develop and coach your employees? We'll talk about system capability and technology, risk and compliance, because risk goes far greater than just what we've dealt with in the pandemic. There are so many things that we're dealing with today that have a compliance to, within the environment of, legal contracts, laws. We need to make sure that we understand and are following through. And then the last one here gets into more of this corporate social responsibility. This is ethics, social responsibility, and sustainability. And that's 165 questions, 2 hours and 45 minutes. There is a question here that says, do individuals to get the CPSM have to complete all 3 exams? And the answer is yes. And I see Kathy did put that out there. You have to complete all 3. The order at which you take them does not matter. So you can take leadership and transformation first. You can then take integration and core. All we are really caring about is at the end, you have completed all 3. What I recommend to folks is start with an exam that you have the most comfort with as far as the competencies, the most insight, the most familiarity, because it just helps you build some confidence going forward. Once you get that first exam out of the way and you've passed, your confidence just grows significantly. So find what you are really good at and the kind of work you're doing today and tap into that one. Now, the normal order does go left to right: core, integration, and leadership. But it doesn't mean you have to go down that path. So there are a couple different ways that we allow individuals to prepare. We have a learning system that is both digital and paper-based. Years ago, buying a book was one of the only ways that you had to go forward. Now, in the world of digital transformation and in the world of sustainability, we've started to go down the path of saying, let's create an online system where you don't have to print out 7 different books. You can make the product available on PCs, on tablets, on phones, and it allows people to learn at their own convenience. But for some of those that want to have that paper book, we do offer that. And so the individual learning system allows you to kind of go through and you can pick one exam and buy that learning system. And, so you're buying maybe the core exam and you'll go through. What you're having to do, though, is when you finally are ready for the next exam, such as the integration or leadership, if you have only purchased the individual, you now have the paper format. We see that included in the digital, you have books that are what were referred to in the past as study guides. So it's the same type of structure of information available to you to learn. So the study guide is a book that is aligned to the exam specification, but then it's supplemented with what is known as a professional series book. And that's the kind of a textbook version of the same information. We give diagnostic practice exams. So this allows you to take and answer the amount of questions that are going to be on that exam in a timed format. They're not the same questions that are on the exam, but they're very similar in structure. So it gives you a chance to kind of simulate the environment when you're in that digital to help you get a little bit more prepared to sit down and go through that 2 hours and 45 minutes straight on, or the 3 hours. And then one of the last things that we have is a guided learning. This is a instructor-led it's a combination of online and instructor-led. So you have the opportunity to go through, and I think it's a 5 or 6 week program for each exam, to read through the material, have practice questions that you can simulate mini exams. You have the worksheets that help you kind of synthesize down the most important information. And once a week, you have an instructor that'll answer your questions. And they'll provide you more insight with taking and putting you into a mini exam process that they'll let you simulate 1 minute per question. Then they'll stop and you'll kind of go back in and you'll talk to that question. You'll talk to the content flow of why the answer was correct, but you'll also talk to how do you read through that question to come up with key concepts. And at some point, When do you need to maybe skip a question and come back to it later? So that's where there is a lot of practice that allows you to go through. And we do have pricing on this, and I can talk to all of these at the end. And the last one, we do still offer, but it's you can have an instructor come on site if a corporate
Just hold on. I'm sure he's coming right back in. So just bear with us.
Sorry about that. I don't know what's going on out here today.
That's okay, Jim. Technology.
Okay. So again, we have allowed individuals to either go through the digital online version with instructor-led, or some of the chapters do have instructors that are available that they can set up some face-to-face, or if you want ISM,
It's when ISM would come in to your company.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, can you see 5 picks for certification candidates?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to spend just a few minutes talking a little bit about what should the candidate be doing. A couple things. We're dealing with individuals that, for the most part, haven't had a timed exam in a number of years. So sitting down and trying to get through that 3 hours, and in that time period, you don't have time for a break. You can take a break, but it really is almost impossible to complete the exam. So you really have to sit down and go through that timed window. In the practice exams, it allows you to kind of do that. What we're doing, though, is trying to say 1 minute per question, and that we have, if you get into situations where you start to panic, you can kind of stop. We give some techniques around, how do you take some recalibration of yourself. And I'll tell you, each time I went through these exams, I had I had kind of these mini panic attacks probably 2 or 3 times. And I had to stop and just close my eyes, take a couple deep breaths, and then I would immediately start back. And that's one of the things we want people to do, is just realize and prepare for that amount of time. Answer every question. There's going to be times you're not going to be certain around what question or what is the right answer. There's always 4 options. We want you to go through and at the end, answer each and every one of them. If you are nearing the point of running out of time, go back and guess. You have a 25% chance of getting it correct. And you would be amazed on how many times, I've worked with individuals and they will have missed passing the exam by 2 or 3 questions. But then they'll say, but I didn't answer 20 questions. Well, if you just kind of go back and do the math, if I have a 25% chance of getting it right, I probably could have guessed on those last ones if I ran out of time and have passed. Because at the end, we want you to have a passing score. And when you're that close, you have the knowledge. It's just that you can get overwhelmed by the situation. We talked a little bit about this anxiety. Everybody is different. You're either in a testing center in a separate room, or today you're online. So you can't leave your computer. If you do, it just, you have an online proctor, that's the end of the exam. So it really is, when it happens, what can you do to recenter yourself to keep going forward? We want to make sure that, the material itself, while we provide you insight, you're going to have questions on the exam that feel as if you've never studied this before. There are going to be certain types of questions that take 3 or 4 different competencies, bundle it together, and ask you to analyze and think through what is the most logical solution. Because that's the way the real world is. We don't just have problems that have one set of variables and one outcome. Our world is mixed with complexity, and we want you to have the ability to think through that degree of complexity. And then it does pay when you take a look at the pricing. There's a significant reduction if you're an ISM member. So go through and become a member, because when you go through on the total cost of this thing, it's pretty substantial savings to you. So here's a question. If you fail and don't finish the exam, do you have to pay for a retake? The answer is yes. There's a 30-day period of going through and waiting to kind of a grace period to go back and prepare for the exam, to take it again. And there is another fee on that. If you do run out of time, that's still, unfortunately, something that they can't control, and you're going to have to pay for going forward. Now, I'm going to just quickly show you. No, I'm not. I'm going to come back and do this at a different point, because we're nearing the time of being out. The digital solution does have a practice exam that looks just like the exam itself. So 1 question per page, you answer it, you move to the next. And it gives you a little clock to help you see how much time are you taking. And while you're reading the question and trying to come up with it, the ideal state is to try to get it done in 1 minute or less. The other thing the learning system does is it will walk you through how to, in each task, you'll have a number of items that you read that are both the study guide and the professional series. That will be followed by either a video that summarizes what's occurring, or you can go through and it has a series of flashcards. And the flashcards just allow you to kind of test your knowledge around a concept versus what it actually is. And then there'll be some practice questions that will, again, see, did you kind of gain the insight we needed you to on that section? And it walks you through that building block all the way through, and you can go back to areas and you can take a look at how you did on your exam, and sections that you didn't do well, you go back into the learning system and you go into, say, sourcing task 7. And you just study on that more. So it allows you to kind of go back and forth to really help you do a Pareto analysis around what are you doing really good at, and what are areas that you need additional time to go forward with. I'm going to talk about when you purchase the exam. And by the way, this is one trick that I really encourage. If you're committed to going through, buy the exam, because once you've done that, it puts a stake in the ground that says, I'm now committed to completing the preparation and taking the exam. I see so many people that go through and they'll say, well, I'm going to take it once I've studied. But life continues to happen. And it's really easy to get into this situation to say, well, next month I'll take the time, and then next month. Sometimes putting that stake in the ground by buying the exam says, I'm going to do something here in the very near future to prepare myself to go forward. Once you buy the exam, and the exams themselves are $295 per exam if you're a member, or $495 per exam if you're a non-member. You get an email, you'll go through and into Pearson VUE decide what testing center makes sense if they're open. Now, the whole situation with the COVID has really kept the environment where you may have to do an online proctoring, or you may go into a testing center. So take a look at what is happening at the time that you want to take it, and that'll help you determine what's the best approach for you. And then once you get into the testing center and see where it's at, you'll schedule the day that you're going to take it. And then you just kind of work backwards from there to make sure that the day that you're entering into that, you're very well prepared. Here we're talking about, if you fail, wait 30 days. Generally, you have to get about 70 to 75% of the questions correct. And what we are finding that if you fail, what we will do is they give you an assessment around what competencies and tasks did you do well in, and which ones didn't you do too well. So what we do is have you go through and focus on the ones that generally you have, you got maybe 50% to 75% of the questions correct. Go back and study those. Manage your time to prepare yourself for the next round that you go through. When you take the next exam, it won't be the same exam. It will be the same competencies that'll be covered, but different questions. So it's not about memorizing it and then the next time you pass on that. The application, there's a process you go through, and have to go through and document your education. It'll look for a work experience, and you get a document from your manager that just shows that you are in this role from this period to this period. If you have difficulty finding that employee or former manager, or the company doesn't exist, call ISM, the service desk, and they'll give you the tips around how do you go about doing that. Once you complete the exams, you just basically take the education documentation, the work experience documentation. ISM gets the exam results from Pearson VUE, and then you pay the application fee. An application fee is $125 if you're a member, or $245 if you're a non-member. So pretty straightforward. Once you pass the exam, complete the process. You have, let's see, was it 4 years from the time you pass the exam until it is no longer valid. But one of the things we encourage folks, and this boggles my mind, people go through and they pass the 3 exams, and then they just don't fill out the paperwork. That's frustrating, because if that time lapses, the only way to get a CPSM is to go back and retake those exams. And you don't want to go back through that pain. If you've already made it through, don't put yourself back into it. Now, some people love taking exams. That's okay. I'm never going to say don't do it. I'm just saying I wouldn't want you to do it. I wouldn't want to do it. Go into ismworld.org/CPSM, and the CPSD is very similar in nature of this process. There's 2 exams you complete on the CPSD, or 3 exams for the CPSM. And with that, I'd just like to say thank you and open it up for questions. I know we're right at the top of the hour, and we did have disruptions, and I really apologize. I can stay over if you have questions, but if you have to drop off, I understand. Folks, thank you. Good luck. If you have any questions whatsoever, contact ISM, either customer service. You can reach out and contact me at jfleming@ismworld.org.
Oh, thank you so much for that, Jim. Question, we did want to find out if you could send me the slides, and then what I'll do is I'll send them over to the group, because a lot of them found the information very valuable and just seeing the slide deck as well.
Okay.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, so let me see, do we have any questions here? No, just a lot of thanks. Okay, so at this time, I would like to thank Jim for explaining everything, and hopefully he answered some of the questions that came through the chat. I would like to mention our next program will be next week, October 6th. We're actually going to have a fireside chat with Mark Holyoke on finding your next career challenge. So at this point, we are going to end our program for today, and I want to thank all of our attendees for joining us. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you, folks. Good luck.